Hi everybody. For everybody that's coming in on this later on and is not watching it live, welcome. My name is Rebecca Boyer and I am the co-founder of Antietam Paranormal Society. I'm also the case manager. I'm pretty much a jack of all trades. So welcome to anybody watching this later on. I'm going to wait just a couple seconds for other people to pop on here and then I'll get started. Got lots of papers that I'm going to talk about today. All right. Go ahead and say hello, everybody. Today I'm talking about building a case file, and that's obviously for a paranormal investigation. So lots of really good details. Hi, Diane. About formal investigations that we do and the types of things that we create for the case to help find a conclusion. So welcome everybody. Go ahead and say hi. You're welcome to ask me questions throughout this live. You are welcome to add things in if you think that there's something additional that you might do or that you would recommend for us doing. We've just done a lot of investigations over time, and these are the things that we usually focus on. So everybody that's hopping in now, I'm Rebecca Boyer. I'm the co-founder of Antietam Paranormal Society, and I also am the case manager. So I'm the one that oversees all the documents in a paranormal investigation case file for Antietam Paranormal Society. So I'm just going to jump right in, just so that nobody gets bored. One of the first steps to any paranormal investigation case is the first interview or first contact that you have with the client. Hi, Diane. It's very important to really connect with a client very well the first time out by asking them specific questions. I know there's a lot of times that I have people approach us about investigating, and the questions, I don't know if they seem intimidating, but a lot of times we lose a lot of clients because they're not willing to answer these questions. So anyone coming on that's watching this live that is possibly coming from a client standpoint, these questions that we do ask are extremely important. They help us determine which route we need to go for your specific case, and it also can help in the entire the time that we do. Everybody's, yes, anybody who's saying that there's orbs in these pictures, this room is very dusty. So there's no ghosts in here right now. It's just dust flying around. Paranormal 101. Anyways, so interview questions. I literally keep papers for people at all times for these kinds of things. It's important to get all of this information when you first make contact with a client, because these could actually make or break your investigation. I always get the address of a location. It's very important to rate out of the gate to determine if the client actually owns the location. If it's a representative of a business, we just try to get permission, obviously, from whoever owns it or whoever makes the decisions, if it's a board or whatnot. But if it's a client that's coming to us and they rent a facility, they're going to probably have to get permission from the actual owner for us to do an investigation. And that's just, from our standpoint, I don't want to go to court trying to tell a judge that there's ghosts in somebody's house. I really don't feel like doing that. So we would just really need to have an owner let us have permission to go in. When is a house or building built? There's a lot to be said about what someone's statements about when a facility was built, when a building was built, when anything has happened to a property, because what a client may say, it was built in the 1950s, but in actuality, it might have been built before that. There's a lot of things involved in trying to determine that. Deed work would actually give you a lot of information because of any improvements made on land or lots. But knowing when it was built could actually help us to to really determine how much history we're going to have to go through to find out more information. Is it a duplex, single family, or townhome? I know this may seem crazy, but it is almost impossible to do an apartment building. If you have a bunch of people in an apartment, I mean, you could go and investigate it, but you're really not going to be able to do much on audio because there's so many people around. Unless you tell everybody to leave the whole building, I really don't know how you would try to get, you know, non-contaminated results there. Is a building in a historically significant location? I mean, this could be important. You never know what kinds of things have happened in the past that might help impact the actual location. How long have they lived there? If they've only lived there for 3 months and they're saying they hear footsteps, I would probably tell them to journalize their experiences a little bit, because they're not quite acclimated to a location or a house to try to determine what is really happening. I know I would keep in contact with a client long term just to make sure that these things over time kind of work themselves out, or they find answers for it. But you know, you really want them to kind of get some use in the house and not immediately think everything's paranormal. How many people live in the home and what are their ages? Age could be an impact if it's a poltergeist-like activity. Knowing that information could help us find a cause or a reason. And obviously, we're not psychologists. We're not, you know, licensed counselors or anything. So there really is a huge line here when you are a paranormal investigator. You don't want to give them information that is not your business in giving them. So everybody has to be very careful about what they say to a client. Unless you are a licensed practitioner, don't give them psychological advice or medical advice. That's bad news. There was a lady actually in this area that was arrested for doing exactly that. So be very careful. Is there any type of construction? I mean, it's important to know if anything has changed in the home at any time or a building that could impact the activity. Like I said, all of these things that we ask clients in the beginning, this is very important part of the paranormal case file, to make sure that we have an accurate representation of what's going on and what could possibly be causing it. Do you have any pets? You know, asking them questions about their pets. Do they act strange in the location? Animals do have a very good sixth sense, so it's a great idea to keep track of what the animals are doing, and who better than the owners to know what's happening with them. Have things been moved? It's nice to know what kind of activity we're dealing with. You know, have you noticed things moved but you don't really pay attention to it, or you just kind of like, oh, you know, maybe I just sat it down and I didn't remember I did that. It's always nice to know, like, if things like that are happening that they don't think about, but asking that question prompts their memory. Strange feelings. I know it seems kind of, but if somebody feels a little odd in their house, maybe they don't think about it too much, but this could actually be recreated. You can actually debunk it. You can find a completely reasonable explanation why they feel weird in their laundry room or their basement. I mean, you know, everybody thinks basements are weird, but a lot of times places like that have high EMF. They could have some sort of chemicals, anything in the air that could possibly be explained why they feel weird in that spot. Where do things occur? Now, I definitely feel like one of the biggest things that anyone should ask a client is to keep a journal. Always start off getting a journal. And it's specifically only for this purpose, to document everything that happens in the home. When it happens, a time, hey Mary, where it happens, what area of the house, who's around, like, you know, was mom in the kitchen, was dad in the bathroom, was, you know, little Alice in the living room, where was everybody, what was happening at that point in time, was there any arguments, was there any strange feelings, and then really, like, put down on paper what exactly is happening. Did something move? Did you see a shadow figure? Anything that happens that they cannot explain, put it down on paper with a time and a date and everybody that was involved. It's kind of like Clue. I say that all the time. Let's see. Deaths, stressful situations, changes in circumstances. One of the things that I don't have here on the questionnaire for, like, initial questionnaire for a client is, has there any, been any type of recent diagnosis of depression, anxiety? There's certain things that can happen. Like I said, we're not psychologists. We're not anybody that could actually help with that, but it's huge if someone has a substance abuse problem to know that, and they really need to focus on getting, that kind of thing. They need to seek counseling. They need to seek help for that first before we really go in there and get an accurate, temperature of what's going on in the location, because it's not good to have mental illness in these situations and you're telling them these things. It's not a good idea. So right up front, you have to represent yourself in the correct way. You cannot give advice that you have absolutely no information to back it up. You cannot diagnose a location's case immediately. You can't tell them that, what is haunting it. Just because they tell you what they've seen doesn't mean that you can immediately tell them, yes, that's what's going on. You have to investigate this. You have to get all the information first before you can make an accurate diagnosis of a paranormal case. So just because they have a little kid in their house does not mean that it's a demon. It doesn't mean that it's evil. So, you really have to make sure you say the right things and that you don't scare the crap out of your client, or make it seem like they don't know what they're talking about. You're trying to soothe them. You're trying to make them feel comfortable in their home. This is their house. You can hang up the phone, but they have to live there. So you really have to be careful with it. But that 100%, your first talk with the client, your first interview and the questions, it's very imperative that you have a detailed questionnaire that you're going to ask these, and definitely have it straight across the board. That's your standard protocol to ask these specific questions. And then, you can build questions off of that to kind of continue with your investigation. So let's just say you've decided that this case needs an investigation. What's next? Definitely a walkthrough. I recommend that any paranormal investigation team or investigator, if you're just one person, or if you're just two people, whatever, do a walkthrough before you go and investigate. It really kind of gives you an idea about these. You have the interview, you have a walkthrough, and then you have your investigation itself. Each time you're asking almost the same questions of the client, and if their stories don't actually, across the board kind of seem the same, you might start have to ask yourself more questions. I'm like, do they really see this? So while you can't tell them that, you really have to make sure that they're really telling you the truth. Because I've had so many people approach us and we show up and it's like a party. They've got everybody from the neighborhood at their house. People are drinking, they're ordering pizza. We're not a sideshow. A lot of us are extremely dedicated to this hobby. Sometimes for me, it's like a full-time job. So I don't want to show up at someone's house, all my equipment that costs thousands of dollars, and, a night away from my kids, and we've got a party and a show. Not appropriate at all. So walk through. Make sure that you're getting the same kind, you're asking the same questions, you're finding out where everything happened. Where are these hot spots? Can you immediately find reasons for what you're seeing? Take an audio recorder with you and just record the whole walkthrough. Look at everything that you can, attention to detail. You could even probably take some equipment, but I wouldn't give them information, just say, oh, I'm just checking out, I'm doing some of the readings just to check some things out. And, we can't really make any decisions until we do the investigation. And, you don't want to jump the gun and give them information that could absolutely be completely debunked when you investigate. So just make sure that you don't say the wrong thing again. So walkthrough notes, definitely also notice safety hazards for your crew. We did a location that when we showed up, it was definitely not safe. It was not in a safe area. You know, and each person kind of, you have to decide whether or not you're okay with being in an unsafe area all night. Now, I know a lot of guys would be okay with that, but we have, you know, we've had over the years a lot of females on our team. And, you know, if it was just us females, I wouldn't really say that was a good idea. And, but that's, you know, everybody's prerogative to make a different decision. So walk through, make sure it's safe for your team. Make sure the location is safe for your team. And if there's any safety issues, make sure that you do a list of anything that you need to put in place for the investigation, like wearing masks, or even if you have to wear specific, you know, coveralls or something, if it's dirty, just focus on that. All right, next, you get to the location and you're about to start investigating. Obviously, the investigation could take a couple hours, but everything else so far has taken a lot of time. You've done an interview, you've done a walkthrough, but you get to the investigation, you're probably going to ask almost the same questions because your team's there now. And if you've done this as a case manager or just the founder of a group, you know, you've already done all these steps, but they weren't there for all of that. Now, some people may not want to know where the hot spots are. Your psychic medium, if you have one, definitely isn't going to want to know any of that information. They're not going to want to know the history. So make sure that you determine who those people are that don't want this information and have them to the side. Don't let them hear any of this. Even if you have to have them show up later, you know, 6 o'clock's our start time, but they're not going to come till 7, so they don't hear any of this. That's definitely something that you can think about. I hope I don't start coughing because I did that last time. I am still sick, everybody, just so you know. I think this is going to last forever, and I film this weekend. So I'm not excited about that. Let's everybody pray that I get rid of this very soon. Anyway, so we're back to starting off in the investigation. One of the things I didn't mention is the history. Now, I don't forget about the history because I'm a history nerd. I love history, and when anybody starts talking about history, unless it's the Civil War, my eyes glaze over when I think about the Civil War. I don't know why. But history for me is awesome. I want to know the history before I go anywhere. And that's not the case for everybody. Some people don't want to know until later. But remember, if you only have one shot at this location, one time to go in, whether it's a private residence or just a business or someplace like that, you want to make sure that you have that history with you. I know there's always going to be one person on the team that is okay with doing the history and knowing that information. So if everybody else on the team doesn't want to know, start out your investigation without that information. Don't use it. Don't have any of that preconceived, ideas about what has happened there or who lived there. Go into the location without the history and, spend the first half of it without that information, just asking the normal questions, general questions, and then in the second half, add it in. But just remember, like, if you can only go there once and you don't have the history, you're literally like missing a whole bunch of information that could help you get responses. So having names, dates, or even information that could help you do trigger objects or doing some sort of like, recently I've thought about doing one of these reenactments at one of our locations. So if you don't have that information, you aren't going to know. You're missing half of the investigation, definitely. So know it before you go. And then if you go, say you go and you know you can go in limited time. So you could go like 5-6 times, go in, investigate the first time without the information, and then go back the second time and use the history. But it's always nice to have it just in case you don't get any responses and then you start using it and you do. Is everybody still with me? Anyway, so we're at the investigation. I like to keep track of everything. Recently, I started discussing on a Facebook Live about how we keep track of weather. So we keep track of like what is it doing outside? Is it sunny? Is it cloudy? Is it raining? Is it icy? The humidity, we keep track of the wind speed. We keep track of the barometric pressure. Oh, Mary's still with me. So all of this information goes into our case file. Now, this is actually a private residence, so I can't show you too much. So this is one of our private residences that we did. Probably one of my favorite reports that I've ever done in my entire life, and it's got everything in it. So when we do several investigations at the same place, and we have all of that data, we can create a graph showing the moon phase, whether it was clear outside, the temperature, and we have all of that together with the information that shows whether or not it was active. Did we get EVPs? Who was there? And putting all that together gives us a little more clarity as to what the main variables are that could increase the activity. Now, it's not to say, I mean, you know, we might say that this is definitely what we feel, but we actually have to take that back, then test the theory. So if our theory is that a waxing crescent is definitely a noticeable variable for us to investigate and have activity, you know, we need to put that theory to test. So we have to go out there when it's a waxing crescent, do the investigation. Was it active? Did we get EVPs? Did we see, you know, have shadow figures? Did we hear things? And then we'll have more of an answer. So if we can, you know, definitively make that decision, then, I mean, we're way ahead than we are right now. Otherwise, what are you doing when you're out investigating? If you like put all this information down, you continuously go back to these locations, but you never put all the information together, it doesn't make any sense not to. So it's very important to keep track of all this, to kind of give yourself a reason for doing it. Otherwise, you're just out there just experiencing things. But when we do our investigations and we get there, we've done another walkthrough with our team, we start on baseline readings. Now, I know baseline readings are kind of putting the moon phases in a great idea. Yes. Oh, and hey, Mary, one recently somebody said keep track of solar activity, solar flares and things like that. Never even thought about that, but I'm going to add it to it. And when I was talking about having all that data, we have two locations that we have awesome data for, the Glade Valley Mill and Oddfellows. You know, we've investigated both of those locations for 5 years now. So we're able to really throw all that information together and get like an accurate idea of what's going on, when we can investigate, when it'll be most active. I mean, who wouldn't love that, to know, okay, well, I love Prospect Place, so I'm definitely going to go this time, now, because I know that it's always active. Or I know Trans-Allegheny is always active. Now, we've been there enough, I should probably know when it's most active, but I've never kept track of the stuff at Trans-Allegheny, because normally we were guides or doing something where we couldn't focus on all that information, so I couldn't write it all down. But this lets us know, these locations that we go to repeatedly, when is the best time for us to test our theories. Anyways, you're at the investigation. We've already built the case to the point where we've done interview, we've done a walkthrough, we've showed up the location, and maybe we've done some paperwork, because to me, make sure that they sign permission that you're doing this. If you want to share anything, make sure that they give you a release for confidentiality. If they're on the investigation, make sure they sign a waiver, because God forbid, I mean, people love to sue people these days, but we've always been great about everybody that we've had investigations with. You know, do your paperwork, do the walkthrough, and then you're started on the baseline readings. We keep track of them. I actually have a paper. I don't know how well you can see it. We go into every room, we do temperature, and we do EMF. And no, it's not because like we're expecting to find paranormal activity that way. Baseline readings are a great way to find out where you shouldn't put your equipment. If you've got something that's temperature related and it goes off because the temperature changes, you don't want to put it in a drafty area. That's just dumb. If the EMF in a specific area is really high or it pulses, no, that's just us. That is not a ghost, trust me. You know, you don't want to put a REM pod where there's a pulse, because you're gonna always have a ghost, because it's always going to go off. Just remember to keep track of your baseline readings. Share them with everybody. We sometimes do them on audio and then write them down, but the best choice is to have a piece of paper that you write them down on, so you know where everything is. We just keep track of general, like, okay, it's usually like 0.3, then if it fluctuates. So, story time. One of the investigations that we've done, Masonic Temple, the first time we ever investigated and we were doing baseline readings, that building was 20,000 square feet. And yes, we did baseline readings of the entire building. It took a long time. But it was me and another investigator, Kat. We were on the, I want to say we were on the basement level. So there was an auditorium, small auditorium, and then there was a back area where there were storage rooms. And well, we were around the bathrooms. Well, we had swung around, and in one area, she noticed that the EMF had raised, and it had gone from like a 0.3 to a 0.4 to, I want to say it was like an 8.2. I'd have to look at the paper, but she noticed that it increased. So my thought was, oh, let me check the temperature. Well, the temperature I had already gone through, because it's a lot quicker to do thermometer readings than it is EMF, because if you move the EMF too quick, it will spike up. It was about probably a 1-foot diameter ball. It stayed about an 8 for probably about 15 minutes. And the temperature, which was probably in the 50s, had raised to the 60s. So it had increased like 10 degrees. So it was very unusual for this area. And yes, we know how to do baseline readings. It wasn't us. It wasn't anything. There was no other source for the temperature or the EMF to have raised like this. But it stayed like that for about 15 minutes. And then just like that, it just disappeared and went back to its original average reading. So it was like a 0.4, and then the temperature went back down 10 degrees. That happened in 2 spots at the Masonic Temple, which was very unusual. We didn't have any other activity at the time, so we couldn't really make sense of why it had happened. No EVPs, because we were doing audio, we were writing it down, and we were keeping track of it via recorder. But it was an interesting thing. One of the next things you do when you do your setup, keep track of everything. I go back to these papers that I have right here over and over through the years. I know every person that was on the investigation. I know where the camera was sat, what direction it was pointing in. I know what recorder we used, where the recorder was sitting, where the mic was aimed. I know the client's name, their phone number, the time we started the investigation. And then we have it, we list all of our equipment, who used it, where it was used, and then any notes that we had, like whether or not it was broken or something wasn't right with it. This is important. It may not seem like it to you, but I'm telling you, if you keep track of this information, it is invaluable. You will look at it a million times, especially if you can do the location again. I recently was contacted actually by a gentleman that I guess oversees the Masonic Temple. I was excited about that. And if he ever sees this, 100%, it was probably one of the most detailed cases that I have information on. Love to go back. Love to. Anyways, moving on. So investigation. Sorry about that. I have a UFO in here. The investigation itself, keep track of where everyone is. Make sure you know where everyone is, because sound travels and recorders pick up everything. So if you know where everyone is and something happens, that allows you to know, okay, Jeremy went to the bathroom at that time and this recorder is only a room away, so that must have been him. And usually he's kind of noisy, so I don't think that would be a problem. But anyways, you keep track of everything, and you're going to know when you do audio and video review where everyone was, what was happening. We keep usually a team on the DVR, so wherever the cameras are, we have somebody watching those cameras all night long, and they put down anything that they see. Now, a lot of times we find that we make notes of like orbs, quite literally, but when it flashes by the screen and we don't know what it was, it's better to write it down to know later on when we do review, hey, pay attention to this time and check that out. What was that? Most cases we can just say, oh, that was just dust. But if you keep track of what's going on your DVR, it's less chances that you're going to miss something. So keep an eye on your DVR while it's running. Don't just let it sit by itself. It especially allows you to, if you're watching it and you see a mist on it, you can immediately call another team in or tell the team, hey, I'm going to check this out. Engine one was a perfect example. We had a team on the DVR, we had a camera in the basement area, and we had a mist go from one side of the hall to the other. If you go to our YouTube channel, that is up on YouTube. So we saw on the DVR this mist travel across this hallway, and we had a team go down, and they spent probably 45 minutes trying to debunk this and recreate it. They could not. We had no reason for a light to have been that far down the hallway. No, the car didn't do it, nothing. And it was one of our better catches over the years. It definitely looks like something was trying to walk through, which was originally like a tunnel entrance. Now, I don't know if I've talked about this recently, but there were tunnels down below Potomac Street at one point in time. I know the Maryland Theater had one. Engine 1 had one. The Masonic Temple had a couple. We don't obviously know. Our assumption is maybe they were tunnels used for Masons way back in the day to access the Masonic Temple. Who knows? I mean, it sounds interesting. But anyways, we captured this light. It is on YouTube, and we could not explain it, but we were able to go down there that time and try to recreate it, and we couldn't. So keep track of this stuff. Keep somebody watching it at all times. People ask, why do you have so many members? Well, when you have a team on a DVR and then you have a team out investigating, it allows you to get more information, and allows you to maximize your investigation at that. Anyways, so investigating, you want to keep track of all your personal experiences, because sometimes you don't say anything on the recorder. I mean, you may gasp, I just saw a shadow figure. Write it down. Keep notes. Let's see, what else do I want to do? Going back to the historical research, investigation, obviously, I think everybody knows how to investigate. Just keep track of everything when you're out there. And I already talked about all the different data that we keep track of. And make sure, like, writing down your equipment, noting where everything was, you don't forget stuff that way. If you have somebody that's responsible for going out there and collecting all the equipment, you know that all your, hey Jennifer, you know that all your stuff's going to come back with you. It's not going to be left at a location that could be like 5 hours from home. But anyways, going back to historical research, I'll touch more on this later, because to me, blabbing about each little detail all at once is just so much information. I do extensive research. When we do as far back as we possibly can, usually to the extent of the improvement on the lot. So if there's a house, we're going to find where the deed starts for that particular property. We want to know how old that property is. That's usually when I stop. We had a case come up recently that we possibly were going to investigate, and we were actually able to get it all the way back to the land patent. I can't remember who exactly, it was some lord. But to me, that's awesome. That's amazing. And not everybody can do that. We just have, you know, between me and our researcher, Sarah, it's awesome. Our case files are incredible. So try to get deeds if you can. A lot of states make you pay for them. I know Pennsylvania is awful about that. I'm not sure about Virginia. I haven't had to do Virginia. I know one of my other researchers did West Virginia, but Maryland is free. You just sign up for their Maryland Land Rec and you can research a property. But it can be difficult because their wording is so confusing. And if it went through like development properties and things like that, it can be a snarl trying to figure it out. And once they get into that cursive writing, oh my gosh, words just don't make sense. Anyways, historical research doesn't just stop with history, deeds. I do geographical information. I want to know what kind of rock formations are around in that area. Is there any type of waterways nearby? Historical things like if there were any battles or, you know, anything came close to that area, you know, even if Lincoln stopped by. I want to know what it is, and we cite all of our resources. So I always make our researchers tell me exactly where they found that information. So if anyone says, well, how do you know this? Go to that page and there you go. Always cite your resources, you know. I never lost that from English class back in elementary school. Anyways, investigation, I think you guys are covered. Historical research. So once you're done, what do you do after you're finished with, you know, your investigation? You've got all your interview stuff. You've got your investigation data. You got your walkthrough notes. You got all this stuff. What do you do with it? Well, obviously you need to do your audio review. I recommend when you do audio review, write down everything that doesn't make sense, even if it's just a tap. You want to know what that sound is later on. If it's a strange sound that doesn't make sense while you're listening, write it down, and then over time, you may find a pattern and you may figure out what exactly it is. Then you can just cross those off, even if it takes you 5 pages. Write everything down. It helps you understand what you're listening to. One of the things that we talked about recently in our team is not all of us can hear equally. Some people say I can hear a little too well. I'm sorry, I can't help that. But what you hear is going to be different than what other people hear. You can't all hear the same frequency. You can't all hear the same, period. So I even recommended to my team, you know, maybe we should do a little bit of study to see like what levels you can hear, how high you can hear, how low you can hear. And then we're going to understand more clearly who and what you're hearing. Just remember that not everybody hears the same. So when you're doing audio review, not everybody's going to catch the same things when you're reviewing it. So do your audio review, take detailed notes, and catalog if you get EVPs, or if it's just something that's, you know, you might note it down, you think it's a male voice, just catalog everything on one paper to the side. So you got your audio notes of what you're hearing. And then if you have any, you know, I've heard a male, another male, a child, keep a catalog of that information. Is there a pattern? Do they all sound the same? Even if you're not using that to cut off and share with the client or even the public, make sure you're keeping track and cataloging all that information. Video notes. Doing a video review is probably the most boring thing you will ever do in your entire life. I don't recommend doing listening and visual at the same time. I know a lot of people have switched over to doing all-inclusive, the audio and videos all together. No, it's too much to do all at once. You can't hear and see all the things. It's too much. You can't do it. Separate it out. Just do the video and then listen to it. I know that seems like a lot, but I'm telling you, it's too much for your senses to handle all that. Write down detailed video notes, and a lot of times I don't have detailed notes because nothing happens. There's a lot of dust. Next thing, if you have audio that's just like session audio, keep track of your, you know, what you did, your team did. Now we keep track when we're on the investigation where everybody goes at each time. So if we did a session in the living room from 6:30 to 9:30, it's written down on our activity report. If you're doing a detailed report for an investigator, you know, make notes like, okay, we went into this room from 6:30 to 9:30. At 6:45, we saw a shadow figure. At 7 p.m., we heard what sounded like a child talking. These notes will help you create a conclusion. I know it seems like a lot of effort, but if you're a paranormal investigator, put the effort into it. You need to do it. Otherwise, why are you here? It's terrible to say, but seriously. Again, catalog any responses that you get. Make note that if you receive a response to a question, that it is a response, not just, I got an EVP. What was happening when you got that response? Keep track of this information. You know, what was leading up to it? A lot of times over the years, you know, I ask my investigators to send me a clip, and they would send me like a 5-second clip of just what they heard. I want a minute before and a minute after, because what happened leading up to it? What happened afterwards? Did we get more words that maybe we aren't hearing right at first? I like to know what's happening, and usually they had to like tell me, you know, a little bit of detail about what happened with them before it actually they got the response. So keep a catalog of all your responses. So once you've done your audio notes, your video notes, you have all that stuff, what do you do with that? Sit around and talk about everything. I'll be honest. You know, talk to each other about what you've gotten if you have a team. If you're, you know, just one person investigator, you know, you don't have a team, really examine everything. Put it in graphs. Try to get everything to line up, you know. what were you doing at this time? And then you're adding the EVPs, and a lot of that stuff will end up giving you some sort of information that might help you making a conclusion. One of the things that I didn't mention in all this jazz, notes for psychic impressions. Now, a lot of people over the years have always, it's funny how I hear this stuff, not like firsthand. Nobody ever tells me like, why don't you have a psychic medium in your group? Or why haven't you brought in a psychic medium? I feel it's important to have psychic impressions, definitely. But the problem with psychic impressions are they're only one person's impression. Everyone's perception of things is different. So if I did a psychic impression of a location and I gave that information, that's only my viewpoint. It could be different than this next psychic's. So while it's important to have it, it's not necessarily important for every paranormal case, because I feel that sometimes the psychic impressions can immediately give an answer. It's almost like that immediate gratification for a client. Oh, well, they told me that, I don't need anything else. It's important to do it all and to have all that information, because again, it's only one perception. What somebody is getting psychically isn't necessarily the full picture. So you may have to call in several if that is your purpose, you know, to have that information. But make sure that you're vetting your psychics and mediums completely before you throw them into a formal investigation setting, because not everybody is exactly what you need for a paranormal case. And definitely don't let your psychic be your first contact with a client. That is not good. Not good at all. Again, it's that immediate gratification, and I don't think it's appropriate. You really want to reserve judgment in anything until after you've done the full case and you throw all the information together. It is awesome if their impression validates what you're getting. That's incredible. So just remember that afterwards, once you put their information in, don't have the psychic as part of the full investigation at first. You know, maybe she can come back or he can come back later on and do another, you know, walkthrough after everything's done. But to me, sometimes it influences the investigation a little too much. So keep all of this stuff, throw it all together later on, and try to form a conclusion. I'm not talking today about like revealing stuff to clients and things like that. I know I don't even know what time it is. I think I've worn out all the subjects about building a case file. There's a lot of information. Like I've said, I have hundreds of case files in a filing cabinet, and every once in a while I pull them out and look at them, and I'm usually very excited about all the information that I kept. And it's amazing to see what you can gather after doing 10 to 20 investigations of one location and having all this information. It really puts a lot of stuff into perspective. So I definitely feel that anybody that's out there doing an actual paranormal team or doing more of a research-based style of paranormal investigation, keep track of all this stuff. I'm actually in the process of writing a book. I think I've pretty much mostly got it done, but it's kind of one of those things where you throw all the information out there and then you really need to organize it. I'm doing like creating a standard and a protocol for paranormal investigation and trying to make sure that like if somebody wants to do something that's formalized, the steps and stages they can go. I mean, everybody has a paranormal guide out there telling you how to investigate the paranormal. Everybody knows how to turn on a piece of equipment, but do they really know how to sit down, test that equipment out before they go out there in a formal setting and investigate? Anybody who knows me knows that I always say that I would rather start out with just a recorder and a video camera on what I'm doing and add in equipment later, because to me, you really lose a lot when you're investigating and you're so focused on a piece of equipment that you have no freaking clue if it's working or not. I just, you know, there's so much attention going into that. You could really be losing a lot of personal experiences that could give you more insight to the location than if you had a REM pod or spirit box going. Spirit boxes, my team hates them because they're so noisy. But that's where we're at. If anybody has any questions about any of this, please feel free to comment. If you have questions about any of this any further and you don't really want to comment on here, feel free to private message me, either my personal page or here on the Antietam Paranormal Society page. I'm always willing to help out anybody that's starting out with paranormal investigation, or people who, I'm not sure. Yeah, exactly, Ed. Yes, I just, there's a lot of times that we'll get involved with, and I notice this a lot in group settings. You have a spirit box on and you hear something that you think is like some sort of response, and people latch onto it. And then you could go a whole hour latching on to this potentially false information. And then you listen back to it, days later, listening to the audio, and it's totally not what you thought you heard. So you've spent all that time thinking that something was a paranormal response, and really it was nothing. So you really have to be careful. I mean, you're wasting your time with some of this equipment. Some of the best investigators that I've seen are people who did this years and years ago. They didn't have all this paranormal equipment to give them, false responses. And they just went out there and documented things, and they came up, look at the Warrens. There's a lot of them that have done research on just psi abilities, psychic abilities. That was really the essential parapsychology research. They weren't really that interested in the ghost aspect. They were just interested in on how these people could accurately, guess what card they were holding up. So it's a long process, but I think, lately I've seen too much focus on equipment, and some of the stuff that I've seen people build and shoddy workmanship, or, people spend hundreds of dollars on things and they don't get their equipment. I don't know. I'd rather not purchase equipment if I'm going to have all that problem. But like I said, if anybody who knows who I am knows that I take my recorder, possibly my spirit box, and my flashlight, and that's about all I have. But anyways, that's about it for tonight. Too many people think that equipment is a foolproof method when all equipment is still at infancy. Yes. And remember that the equipment that is being developed, it may say this was specifically made for paranormal investigation. Well, there's always that fine print that says it's for entertainment purposes only. That's because the equipment is currently made based on current science, current technology. And I'm telling you right now, none of it picks up actual ghosts all the time. It just doesn't work that way. Some of them can manipulate it, some of them can't. Some of it's false positive. So no matter what you have, whether you use a Magnite flashlight to get responses, a REM pod, an SLS camera, it all has false positives. All of it. You just have to make sure that you understand what the false positives are and when to turn the equipment off, because you're not going to get any real positive results. But that's just my little... Yes, I don't like phone apps either. To me, turn your phone off, because the phone does too much stuff and it can listen into what you're saying, and you never know if that app actually can hear what you're saying, and it uses the information it's getting to give you responses. I don't like that. Don't like that at all. I'm a little old-fashioned. I guess I'm kind of jaded, critical. I don't know. Hardcore. Ed and Mary, thank you for joining me. I'm going to let it go with that. Again, if you have any questions, let me know. If you have any topic ideas, please let me know. I don't know what I'm going to talk about the next time. I talk about a lot of crazy stuff because I've been looking at, I actually keep notes. Any suggestions? Yeah, I don't trust them either. I mean, your phone does so many things. I don't understand how phones could really do all that stuff. Wow. I talked about haunted objects once. Oh, critical thinking and faulty causation. Oh, you're welcome, Mary. How about popular questions? I think that's a good one. And I may post something up on the page about popular paranormal questions that I get asked. I mean, I get asked some crazy, crazy stuff. But you know what? Honestly, it's not all crazy because I've experienced some really strange, odd things as my time as an investigator. So, yep, that's what we'll do. So next week on Tuesday, we will do most popular questions that I get asked. And I'm going to probably post up a question asking for your questions. And I'm not going to respond to them right away. I will respond next Tuesday. But everybody, thanks for watching. If you're watching this later on, sorry for all the side chats there. But till next time, I'm Rebecca Boyer. I am the co-founder of Antietam Paranormal Society, and we'll see you next week. Bye!